I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd end up sitting in a police station at 63 years old, my wrists still aching from where they'd gripped me, my name being whispered in the worst possible context. But that's exactly where I found myself on a cold Tuesday morning in March 2024 in downtown Portland, Oregon, watching rain streak down the windows of the precinct on Southwest 2nd Avenue, while a detective with tired eyes asked me questions I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. They wanted to know about my grandson. They wanted to know what I'd done to him. And the woman who put me there, who looked me in the eye just 3 days earlier and called me mom, was sitting somewhere safe, playing the victim, while I became the monster. My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and this is how my life came apart at the seams. It started 6 months earlier, in September, when my son David brought home his new wife, Melissa. They'd married quickly after only 8 months of dating, and I'd had reservations I'd swallowed down like bitter medicine. She was 29, polished, with perfect blonde hair that never seemed to move, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. David was 34, my only child, and he looked at her like she'd hung the moon and stars just for him. "Mom, you're going to love her," he said, standing in my living room in my modest house in the Selwood neighborhood, the one his father and I had bought 30 years ago. The hardwood floors creaked under his feet the same way they had when he was a boy. "She's amazing with kids. She works in pediatric nursing." I'd smiled and hugged Melissa, felt her body stiffen slightly under my embrace, noticed the way she pulled back just a fraction too quickly, but I told myself I was being paranoid, being one of those mothers who couldn't let go. My husband Thomas had died 4 years earlier of a heart attack, and David was all I had left. I wanted him to be happy. Then came November, when Melissa announced she was pregnant. David was ecstatic. I was happy for them, genuinely, though something in Melissa's eyes when she looked at me during the announcement dinner at Jake's Grill on Southwest Stark Street made my stomach twist. It was a look that said I was temporary, that I was an obstacle to be managed. "We want you involved, Mom," David said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His palm was warm, familiar. "You're going to be Grandma." "I'll help however I can," I promised, and I meant it. The baby, a boy they named Oliver, was born in early July 2024. I was at the hospital, Providence Portland Medical Center, standing outside the delivery room because Melissa had requested only David be present. I'd swallowed that hurt, too. When they finally let me in to meet my grandson, he was perfect. Tiny fingers, dark hair like David's, eyes that would probably turn brown like his father's and grandfather's. I held him, breathed in that newborn smell, felt my heart crack open in a way I hadn't experienced since David was born. "Hello, sweet boy," I whispered. "I'm your grandma." Melissa watched me from the hospital bed with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We'll need your help," she said. "David's work schedule is crazy, and I'll need to go back to my job in a few months. Daycare is so expensive." "Of course," I said immediately. "Whatever you need." That should have been my first clue, the way she phrased it. Not as a grandmother's privilege, but as a favor she was granting me, a job I'd be performing. For the first 3 months, everything seemed fine. I watched Oliver 3 days a week while Melissa worked her shifts at the hospital and David managed his construction projects across the city. I'd arrive at their apartment in the Pearl District at 7 in the morning, let myself in with the key they'd given me, and spend the day with my grandson. I changed diapers, sang lullabies my mother had sung to me, walked him around the apartment when he was fussy. But I started noticing things, small things that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern I didn't want to see. Melissa would come home and immediately check Oliver over, her hands efficient and clinical, examining him like she was documenting evidence rather than greeting her son. She'd ask pointed questions. Did he cry much? How long? Did you pick him up right away? You didn't let him get too warm, did you? The apartment can get stuffy. He was fine, I'd assure her. We had a good day. She'd nod, but there was something in her eyes, something calculating. Then she started sending David text messages while I was there, which he'd tell me about later. Concerns, small worries. Your mom seems forgetful. She couldn't remember if she'd fed him at 10 or 11. What if she forgets something important? Mom's not forgetful, David defended me, but I could hear the tiny seed of doubt in his voice. The attacks were subtle. She'd mention in casual conversation how older people sometimes didn't realize their reflexes were slowing down, how tragic it would be if someone dropped a baby. She'd bring up news articles about grandparents who'd accidentally hurt grandchildren through negligence. She'd sigh and say how much she wished she could stay home full time, but they needed her income, and daycare waiting lists were so long. I felt the ground shifting under me, but couldn't articulate how or why. In early October, 4 months after Oliver was born, Melissa called me on a Thursday evening. I was in my kitchen, making tea, looking out at my small backyard, where the maple tree Thomas had planted was dropping its red leaves. Eleanor, we need to talk about Oliver's care situation, she said. No preamble, no warmth. I think it might be time to consider other options. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Has something happened? Is he okay? He's fine, but I've been noticing some things. He seems fussier after days with you, more irritable, and I found a small bruise on his arm yesterday, on the inside of his elbow. My heart started pounding. A bruise? Melissa, I have no idea how. Babies get little marks all the time, don't they? Maybe from his clothing or when he's moving around? Maybe. Her voice was cold. But I'm his mother, Eleanor. I have to think about his safety first. I found a daycare that has an opening. Little Sprouts on Northwest 23rd. We're going to start him there next week. But I felt tears burning my eyes. I love watching him. Please, if I did something wrong, tell me. I'll fix it. It's not about doing something wrong. It's about what's best for Oliver. She paused. David agrees. That last part was a knife. When I called David that night, he sounded exhausted, caught in the middle. Mom, she's his mother. She's a medical professional. If she's concerned about something, I have to listen. It doesn't mean we don't trust you. It's just, maybe it's better this way. More structured for Oliver. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, feeling like I was losing something I couldn't name, but I told myself I was overreacting. I could still be a grandmother, still visit, still be part of Oliver's life. This wasn't the end. I didn't know that it was just the beginning. Little Sprouts Daycare was a bright, modern facility with murals of animals on the walls and security cameras in every room. Melissa had emphasized that point multiple times. They have cameras everywhere, complete transparency. I can check on Oliver anytime from my phone. Oliver started there in mid-October. I asked if I could visit him there sometimes, maybe during my lunch break. Melissa said the daycare had a policy about non-parent visitors disrupting routines. I swallowed that too. Then came the Friday in early November that destroyed everything. I was at home doing laundry in the basement when my phone rang. It was David, and his voice was shaking. "Mom, you need to come to the hospital. Now. Providence, Portland." Terror flooded through me. "What's wrong? Is it Oliver?" "Just come, please." He hung up. I drove through Portland's traffic with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, running through every horrible possibility. An accident, an illness, something wrong with the baby I'd held and loved. When I got to the pediatric emergency department, David met me in the waiting room. His face was pale, his eyes red. "What happened?" I demanded. "Oliver's okay. He's being examined. But Mom," he ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd done since childhood when he was stressed. "Melissa picked him up from daycare today and found bruises on his back and legs. The daycare director said you were there today." Everything stopped. "What? I wasn't at the daycare. I haven't been there at all. What are you talking about?" The director told Melissa that someone signed in as you, said they were Oliver's grandmother, showed ID, and took him out for an hour during lunch. When Oliver came back, one of the teachers noticed he seemed upset and found the bruises during a diaper change. The floor seemed to tilt. "David, I swear to you, I was not there. I was at home all day. I can show you. I was doing laundry. I went to the grocery store. I have receipts." "Then who was there?" His voice broke. "Someone used your name. Someone had ID with your name. Mom, what the hell is going on?" I couldn't answer because I didn't know. Nothing made sense. That's when Melissa appeared from a hallway, her face a perfect mask of devastated mother. When she saw me, something flickered in her eyes, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "How could you?" she said, her voice loud enough to carry across the waiting room. Other people turned to look. "He's a baby, your own grandson. How could you hurt him?" "I didn't," I started, but she cut me off. "The daycare has you on camera. You signed him out. You took him. And when he came back, he had bruises all over his little body." She was crying now, or seemed to be. I knew something was wrong. I knew it. But David kept saying I was being paranoid, that you'd never hurt Oliver. And now look what happened. People were staring. A security guard was moving toward us. David looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Doubt, fear, like he was looking at a stranger. "I wasn't there," I said, hearing how weak it sounded. "I don't know what's happening, but I wasn't at that daycare. You have to believe me." "The cameras don't lie," Melissa said. That night, from my house, I called the daycare director. She was apologetic but firm. "Mrs. Hartwell, I understand this is upsetting, but we have clear footage of you arriving at 12:30 p.m., showing your driver's license and signing Oliver out. You were wearing a blue jacket and jeans. You brought him back at 1:45 p.m. I can't explain why you're denying it, but the evidence is clear." "Can I see the footage?" I asked desperately. "That's been turned over to the police as part of the investigation. I'm sorry, but I can't discuss this further." The police. The word felt unreal. 2 days later, on that Tuesday morning in March in my memory, but actually mid-November in reality, 2 detectives came to my door. A man and a woman, both with expressions of professional neutrality that didn't hide the judgment underneath. They asked me to come to the station to answer some questions. I went because I had nothing to hide, because I thought the truth would protect me. I was wrong. At the station on Southwest 2nd Avenue, in a small room with fluorescent lights that made everything look sick and washed out, they showed me the footage. And there I was, walking into the daycare, smiling at the front desk, showing what looked like my driver's license, wearing clothes I owned, signing the sheet with handwriting that looked like mine, carrying Oliver out in his car seat, bringing him back an hour later. It was me, but it wasn't me. I don't understand, I whispered, watching the screen. That's not me. I mean, it looks like me, but I wasn't there. I swear I wasn't there. The female detective, whose name tag said Rodriguez, leaned forward. Mrs. Hartwell, we understand this must be difficult. Sometimes people don't remember things clearly. Sometimes stress. I'm not stressed or confused, I interrupted. I did not go to that daycare. Someone else did. Someone who looks like me. They exchanged glances, the kind of glances that said they'd heard this before, from guilty people trying to escape consequences. They asked about my relationship with Melissa, about whether I'd been angry about not being able to watch Oliver anymore, about whether I'd felt pushed aside, replaced. Every answer I gave seemed to make things worse. They let me go that day, but told me not to leave the city. An investigation was ongoing. Child Protective Services was involved. I was not to have any contact with Oliver. I drove home in a daze and sat in my living room as the November afternoon faded into evening. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dark, trying to understand how my life had become unrecognizable. David called that evening. Mom, I don't know what to think. That footage, it really looks like you. It wasn't me, David. You have to believe me. You're my son. You know me. Would I ever hurt a child, especially Oliver? Silence. On the other end, when he finally spoke, his voice was small. Melissa thinks maybe you had some kind of episode, like early dementia or something, where you don't remember what you did. I don't have dementia, I said, hearing my voice rise. I'm 63, not 90, and I'm completely lucid. Someone is doing this to me. Someone who wants to separate me from you and Oliver. That sounds paranoid, Mom. Or it sounds true, I said. David, please, don't let her do this. Don't let her turn you against me. I have to go, he said. Melissa needs me. He hung up. That was the moment I realized I was alone in this. Completely alone. The next weeks were a nightmare. Word spread through my neighborhood somehow. People I'd known for years started looking at me differently. The woman at the coffee shop on 13th Avenue, who'd always greeted me by name, suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Someone spray painted child abuser on my garage door one night. I scrubbed it off at 4 a.m, crying so hard I could barely see. The police investigation continued. They interviewed my neighbors, asking about my behavior, whether they'd noticed anything strange. They went through my phone records, my financial records. They treated me like a criminal while I tried to prove a negative, that I hadn't done something. My lawyer, a public defender named Mitchell Crane, who looked too young to have passed the bar, was sympathetic but realistic. Mrs. Hartwell, the video evidence is very compelling. Unless you can definitively prove you were somewhere else at that exact time, this is going to be difficult. I told you I was at home, doing laundry. Can anyone verify that? Did you talk to anyone, see anyone? I thought back to that day, trying to remember. I went to the Safeway on Milwaukee Avenue around 11. I probably still have the receipt, but that doesn't cover the time I supposedly took Oliver out. Find that receipt, Mitchell said, and we need to think about who else might want to frame you. Is there anyone who would benefit from you being separated from your family? I looked at him. My daughter-in-law. He raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation. What possible motive would she have? I don't know exactly, I admitted, but she's been pushing me out since Oliver was born. Every interaction felt like she was building a case against me. What if this is part of that? What if she somehow arranged this? Mitchell looked skeptical. How would she have managed that? Found someone who looks like you, got them your ID somehow, convinced them to go to the daycare? When he said it out loud, it did sound insane, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Melissa was behind this somehow. December came. The investigation was still ongoing, but I wasn't arrested. Mitchell said that was good news. It meant they didn't quite have enough to charge me, but the damage was done. My name was ruined. David stopped answering my calls. I'd lost my grandson, my son, my reputation. I stopped leaving the house unless I had to. I stopped answering the phone when numbers I didn't recognize called. I lived in a kind of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, 2 days before Christmas, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Hartwell? A woman's voice, young, uncertain. My name is Cassidy Porter. I work at Little Sprouts Daycare. I think I need to talk to you. My heart started pounding. What about? Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Today? We met at a coffee shop in the Hawthorne district, far from my neighborhood. Cassidy was maybe 25, with nervous hands and dark circles under her eyes. She ordered a coffee she didn't drink and looked over her shoulder twice before speaking. I'm probably going to lose my job for this, she said, but I can't stay quiet anymore. It's not right. What's not right? She took a breath. The daycare footage, the video that supposedly shows you taking Oliver. I was working that day. I was at the front desk when that woman came in. My breath caught. That woman? It wasn't you, Mrs. Hartwell. It looked like you. Same hair, similar build, same general age. But something about her felt off. The way she moved, her voice. I couldn't place it at the time, but later, after all this blew up, I kept thinking about it. Did you tell the director? The police? Cassidy looked down at her coffee. I tried. My manager said I was mistaken, that the video clearly showed you. She said if I kept insisting otherwise, I'd be interfering with an investigation. But Mrs. Hartwell, I've met you before. You came to the daycare once, right when Oliver first started, to drop off some supplies Melissa forgot. I remembered you, and the woman who came that day was not you. Hope, terrifying and painful, bloomed in my chest. Would you be willing to testify to that? To go on record? That's why I called you, she said. I talked to my boyfriend who's in law school. He said I need to go to the police with this, but I'm scared. The daycare is threatening legal action against anyone who disparages them publicly. This whole thing has been bad for their business. Please, I said, and I didn't care that I was begging. Please help me. I didn't hurt my grandson. Someone is framing me, and if you don't speak up, they're going to get away with it. She nodded slowly. I'll do it. I'll call the detective tomorrow. But Mrs. Hartwell, there's something else. What? After the incident, Melissa came by the daycare to get copies of all the footage. She said it was for her lawyer, but I saw her talking to my manager in her office for a long time, and when she left, my manager called a staff meeting and told us we were not to discuss the case with anyone, not police, not investigators, not other parents. She said we were to refer all questions to the daycare's legal team. That felt weird to me. Why would she be trying to shut down communication if everything was legitimate? I sat back, mind racing. Do you know if Melissa had access to the security system or if she knew how the cameras worked? I'm not sure about access, but she toured the facility extensively before enrolling Oliver. She asked a lot of questions about the security setup, the cameras, the sign-in procedures. I remember because it was more detailed than most parents, but she's a nurse, so I figured she was just being thorough. We talked for another 30 minutes. Cassidy gave me her phone number and promised to contact Detective Rodriguez the next day. When we parted, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But hope, I was learning, was a dangerous thing. Cassidy did call the police. Detective Rodriguez interviewed her after Christmas. Mitchell called me afterward with an update. The detective is reviewing the case again, he said, but Cassidy's testimony alone isn't enough. It's one person's opinion against video evidence. We need more. Like what? Like proof of where you actually were during that time window, or proof that someone else had access to your identification and could have impersonated you, or proof that Melissa has been systematically setting you up. Right now, we have puzzle pieces, but not a complete picture. I hung up and thought about what he'd said. Someone had my ID or a convincing fake. They knew what I looked like, how I dressed, my handwriting. They timed it perfectly to happen when I was alone at home with no alibi. Who could have arranged that? The answer felt obvious, but proving it was another matter. I started going through my memories systematically, looking for moments when Melissa might have had access to my personal information. My driver's license, my typical clothing, my routines. Then I remembered. 3 months ago, in late September, Melissa had asked to borrow my car for a day. Hers was in the shop, she said, and she needed to run errands. I'd given her my keys without thinking twice. She'd had my car, and therefore my insurance card, my registration, and everything in my glove compartment for 8 hours. Had that been when she'd copied my ID? Was that even possible? I called Mitchell. Could someone make a fake ID from a real one? Good enough to fool a daycare employee? Sure, he said. There are apps that can scan and replicate IDs. Plenty of people make fake ones for underage drinking. If someone had access to your real license for a few minutes, they could photograph it and have a fake made for less than $100 online. Melissa borrowed my car in September. She could have done it then. That's speculative, Eleanor. We'd need proof. What if we could find the person who impersonated me? If Melissa hired someone, there'd be a trail, right? A payment? A communication? Maybe. But accessing her financial records without cause would be illegal. We'd need to convince the police to investigate her. And right now, they think you're the perpetrator, not the victim. I felt like I was trying to climb a mountain made of sand. Every step forward caused a slide backward. January 2025 arrived cold and bitter. The investigation had stalled. The police hadn't charged me, but they hadn't cleared me either. I existed in a legal limbo, my life on hold, my family lost to me. Then, on a Wednesday evening in mid-January, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find David standing on my porch, and he looked terrible. Thin, exhausted, older than his 34 years. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I let him in, afraid to hope, afraid to breathe. We sat in my living room, the same living room where he'd done homework as a teenager, where Thomas and I had watched him open Christmas presents, where a lifetime of memories lived in the walls. "Melissa and I are having problems," he said finally. "She's been different lately, more controlling. She doesn't want me talking to anyone without her present. She monitors my phone, my emails. If I mention maybe trying to contact you, she loses it. Says I'm betraying Oliver, putting him at risk." "David," he held up a hand, "let me finish. I found something. I wasn't snooping, I swear, but her laptop was open, and I saw an email. It was from October, before the daycare incident. An email to someone named Rachel Bennett, offering her $5,000 for acting services and asking for her measurements and a photo. My heart stopped. "Did you see a reply?" "No. The email was in her drafts folder, not sent. Or maybe she sent it and deleted the sent copy. I don't know. But Mom, when I asked her about it, she said it was nothing. Just something she'd been looking into for a work training video that never happened. But the timeline was wrong, and her reaction was too defensive. Do you believe her?" He looked at me with eyes full of pain. "I don't know what I believe anymore, but I know my mother, and I've been thinking about that daycare video over and over. The more I watch it, and they gave us a copy for the investigation, the more I see little things that don't look quite right. The way the woman walks, the way she holds Oliver. You have this specific way you cradle babies, supporting their head with your whole hand. The woman in the video doesn't do that." Tears were running down my face. "I didn't hurt him, David. I would never, ever hurt him. Someone set me up, and I think it was Melissa." "I know," he whispered. "God help me, I know." He stayed for 2 hours. We talked about everything, about his relationship with Melissa, about the red flags he'd ignored, about how quickly she'd isolated him from friends and family, about how she'd convinced him that everyone else was the problem, never her. When he left, he hugged me for the first time in months, and it felt like being allowed to breathe again. "I'm going to find out the truth," he promised. "Whatever it is, however bad it is, I need to know." 2 weeks later, David called me at 6 a.m. "Mom, I found her. Rachel Bennett. She's real. She lives in Beaverton. I'm going to talk to her." "David, be careful. I'm already on my way." Rachel Bennett was an aspiring actress who worked as a server at a restaurant in downtown Portland. David talked to her at her apartment, and later he told me everything. Rachel had been hired through Craigslist in October by someone calling themselves Marie to do what she thought was a training exercise for a daycare. She was told to dress like a typical grandmother, given a wig and specific clothing to wear, and asked to go to Little Sprouts Daycare, sign out a baby using the name Eleanor Hartwell, and bring the baby back an hour later. She was told it was to test the daycare's security protocols and that the baby's real mother had given permission. She was paid $5,000 in cash. She never met her employer in person. All communication was through email and burner phones. The money was left in a locker at Union Station. She had no idea she'd been part of a crime. When David showed her photos of the real Eleanor Hartwell, me, she gasped. "Oh my God, they made me look like her. The wig, the clothes they gave me, the way they told me to talk. They said I was playing a character. I thought it was method acting." Research. David recorded the conversation on his phone. Then he went to the police. Detective Rodriguez reopened the investigation with new eyes. With Rachel's testimony and David's evidence, they got a warrant for Melissa's financial records and electronic devices. What they found unraveled everything. Melissa had used a fake email account to hire Rachel. She'd withdrawn $5,200 in cash from a personal savings account 3 weeks before the daycare incident. $5,000 for Rachel, $200 for materials. She'd used a work computer to research local actresses and how to create fake identification. She'd photographed my driver's license. During that day, she'd borrowed my car and had a replica made through a website that advertised novelty IDs. And in her search history, from weeks before Oliver was even born, they found queries like how to prove grandparent is dangerous, reporting child abuse, getting restraining order against family member, and grandparents' rights. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The bruises on Oliver, the hospital examination eventually concluded they were consistent with normal infant activity. Minor marks from grabbing at things, from being handled, from the typical bumps of babyhood. Nothing about them indicated abuse. But Melissa had been a pediatric nurse. She'd known how to make them seem sinister, how to photograph them in specific ways, how to present them to doctors to raise alarm. She'd manufactured the entire crisis. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Melissa was arrested at the hospital where she worked. The charges included filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, and child endangerment. Because her scheme had ultimately put Oliver in a position where his actual safety was compromised by the chaos she'd created. I wasn't there when they arrested her. I heard about it from David, who moved back into his old childhood bedroom in my house with Oliver while the legal proceedings played out. She's saying she did it because she thought you were actually dangerous, David told me, his voice hollow, that she was protecting Oliver, that all the evidence she manufactured was just to make sure people took her concerns seriously. Do you believe that? No, he said. I think she wanted you gone. I think she wanted me isolated and dependent on only her. I think Oliver was just a tool to make that happen. The daycare settled quietly out of court, issuing a public apology for their security failures and implementing new policies. The charges against me were formally dismissed in early March. My name was cleared. But clearing your name doesn't undo the damage. The neighbors who'd whispered about me didn't suddenly forget. The woman at the coffee shop who'd stopped serving me with a smile didn't rush to apologize. The word abuse and my name had been linked together for months, and that kind of stain doesn't wash out easily. David and Melissa divorced. She took a plea deal, 3 years probation, mandatory psychiatric evaluation, loss of her nursing license. She'd never be alone with Oliver again. She moved back to wherever she'd come from before meeting David. I never asked where. I didn't care. Oliver stayed with us. At 10 months old, he was pulling himself up on furniture, babbling constantly, learning the world was a place he could trust. David was a good father, patient and present, though I could see the grief in him, the loss of the life he thought he was building, the betrayal that would probably mark him forever. I went back to watching Oliver 3 days a week while David worked. This time, there was no question about it, no discussion, just David dropping him off at my house with his diaper bag and saying, "See you at 5, Mom." Some evenings, after Oliver was asleep in the portable crib David had set up in the spare room, my son and I would sit in the kitchen drinking tea, not saying much. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things we didn't need to say: understanding, forgiveness, love that had survived being tested. "I'm sorry, Mom," David said one night in late March, as the cherry trees were starting to bloom outside. "I should have believed you from the beginning. I should have known. She was your wife. You wanted to believe her. That's not wrong." "It almost cost me you," he said. I reached across the table and held his hand. But it didn't. Spring came to Portland the way it always does, sudden and overwhelming, rain giving way to sun, everything blooming at once. I planted tomatoes in my garden. I took Oliver to the park and pushed him on the baby swings. I had coffee with neighbors who'd quietly started speaking to me again, neither of us mentioning the months they'd believed I was a monster. Life didn't go back to normal. Normal was gone. But we built something new in its place. On a Saturday in April, David and Oliver and I drove out to Multnomah Falls, an hour east of the city. The waterfall thundered down the cliff face, mist rising up to catch the afternoon light. Oliver stared at it with wide eyes from his carrier on David's chest. "He won't remember this," David said. "No," I agreed, "but we will." We stood there together, 3 generations, watching the water fall and fall and fall, endless and unchanging. The world had tried to break us apart, had come so close to succeeding, but we were still here, still together. That was enough. I looked at my grandson's small hand gripping David's finger and thought about all the days ahead of us. Birthday parties and scraped knees and bedtime stories. The ordinary miracle of family. The water roared. The mist rose. We stood together in the spray and the light, and I knew that whatever came next, we would face it the way we'd faced everything else. Not broken, not ruined, still standing,